Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two-Way Tonight, our regular evening program where we summarize the news of the day, kick things around, and then take your questions if you're here on the Two-Way platform. You're going to want to raise your hand because I'm going to bring up some stuff that you're going to want to comment on. So please, if you're here on the Two-Way platform, raise them proud and high and say you want to be part of the conversation, which is implicitly the message I will take away if I see the yellow hand next to your head, like Rex has just done. If you're watching on two-way, not on two-way, but on X or YouTube, do not raise your hand. Do not put smack in the chat. I hope you all watched the debut of the group chat live. If you didn't, it's available on YouTube now on demand. It was excellent, and it's going to be an extraordinarily valuable part of the two-way platform. And Right after this show, Michael Moynihan's program will stream on YouTube as well. And then, of course, tomorrow we got a bunch of other shows, including the morning meeting. So thank you for joining. And now, I think, some nights I do the news without the guests, and some nights I bring the guests in. This is a night to bring in my co-host for the evening. Really needs no introduction, but let me give him one. J. Hogan Gidley, who served in a senior position in the Trump administration. He worked in amongst the politicians he's worked with previously include Elizabeth Dole, whose nickname she hated was Sugar Lips. Not sure why she was called that, but that was her nickname, Hogan. Don't make that face. And Hogan, of course, also worked for Mike Huckabee when he ran for president of the United States with a guy named Chip Saltzman. And one of the pleasures of my career was listening to Hogan and Chip rag on each other. And Chip's an interesting character. We could spend a whole episode on him, but we won't. Uh, and um, and now Hogan, amongst other things, advises the United States Speaker of the House. Hogan, welcome in. Earlier today, I had a former Speaker of the House, fella goes by the name of Newt, on the Next Up program, and I asked him to do word association about a number of Trump administration figures, and he praised the current speaker to the high heavens. And you've been I'd say a minuscule part, but a part of allowing Mike Johnson to defy expectations over and over and over and over again. Welcome, Hogan.
It's great to be with you. And I had a good conversation with Newt Gingrich about the op-ed he placed last week about the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, understanding no one knows that position better than Newt Gingrich. So it's always
Yeah.
nice to have his opinion and
Yeah.
praise for that
And
matter.
where was his op-ed piece?
That's a great question. I think it ran in Fox.com, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was great.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. And again, Hogan and I will run through the news, and then we'll take your questions. And we might have a surprise guest. Can't say who it is, but we might have a surprise guest. Hogan, it's
I didn't
someone.
agree to that.
Oh no, you'll like if this person shows up, you'll be delighted. Speaking of D, you deconstruct, you demystify, and you delineate the Trump culture as well as anyone I know. I'll tell you another thing I talked about with Newt, which I would have loved for you to have been on. We talked about how people who think is dumb are ironically themselves dumb, because you may think he's the most evil person in the world, but he's not dumb. And
Nope.
Newton and I kind of broke down the different ways Trump is a genius, including he understands people. If you called Trump right now and said, "What are Mark Halperin's vulnerabilities? What are Mark Halperin's interests? How could we manipulate Mark Halperin?" Trump could answer like that. And I don't mean to flatter myself. In fact, just the opposite. He doesn't really know me all that well, but he is so instinctive about people. He understands the media better than any president I've ever covered.
Yep.
And he can have a conversation about one thing and be gaming out three other things he needs to solve at the same time. These are just some of the things Newton and I listed, which is like a 30% of the list. I say again, if you think Trump is an idiot, if you think Trump is an evil, if you think Trump espouses really unpopular things, if you think Trump makes mistakes all the time, then you should realize, well, he must be a genius to get elected president twice, being that horrible a person. And he is. So you can call him an evil genius if you want, but he is a genius. And I told Newt, Hogan, I'll let you in a minute. I'm just doing my monologue now, but I'm glad you're here. I told Newt, I said, literally, I've lost friends, very bright people. Most of my friends are, I'd say, above average intelligence, just by fluke. I've lost friends who've never met Trump, and they say to me, and coincidentally, they're all liberals, and they'll say, Trump's a moron. And I'll say, Trump is smarter than you. And they'll say, I will never be friends with you again. How could you say that? And what I say to some of them, it really pisses them off. I say, okay, forget how good he is at politics. Trump made $1 billion. I said, now, yes, his father was a millionaire, but his father wasn't a billionaire. I said, I'll give you as much money as Donald Trump's father gave him, and you go make $1 billion. And by the way, he did it basically selling nothing. He just sold his name. So anyway, Hogan, welcome in. You can talk about Trump genius, and then we'll do the news.
Thank you very much. And you're right. I had somebody come up on the street to me one time back when I was in the administration, similar claim that your friends, your liberal elite friends, Mark,
Yeah,
make to you. But this
yeah.
person said, my mom told me if I ever met somebody in the Trump administration to ask him this question. He said, I'm a Trump fan. My mom wants to know, is he as dumb in real life as he appears on television? And I said, well, let me ask you this. Is your mom a billionaire? And he goes, no. And I said, well, I know a lot of people who aren't billionaires who are stupid. I don't know any billionaire who's dumb.
Yeah,
And he kind of looked at me funny and I said, thanks, and just kind of
yeah.
walked off
There you go.
because it's obvious his ability to read people and work people is something like I've never seen before. And to watch him do it with foreign leaders, which I got to see all the time up close and personal, and to see the beads of sweat and the white knuckles from like the John Boltons or the Pompeos of the world in these conversations, to be like, what is happening here? And then he'd come over the top with some incredible joke and the whole room would fall apart laughing. And then the deal started to get done. Then they started working on stuff. He would try and gauge and see where that particular leader was on a topic. And the DC decorum, the erudite, mentality of these folks, while probably there's a time and a place for some of it, and it's worked in the past, it doesn't work now, and that's not who Donald Trump is. So to see him, some of it's the weave, some of it's other things, but to work these people over, they don't even realize they're being worked, and they
Exactly.
don't realize what they've just given away,
Yeah,
something they didn't want to give away in the first place, but
yeah.
they did it.
And I'll say this, you could read every New York Times story and Washington Post story ever written about Donald Trump, and not one of them will even hint that he's a smart person. Not one.
In fact, it's the opposite.
Exactly. You could read last story, Bill Clinton, genius. Barack Obama, genius. Now,
Yes.
not a lot of stories about Joe Biden or George W. Bush, genius, although one of them is very smart. Won't say which. But Donald Trump, as you said, opposite. If you read the Washington Post, New York Times, if you never knew anything about Donald Trump and you read the Washington Post, New York Times, you say the United States has elected a moron as president, but it's not true. In fact, he's a genius. Okay. In fact, some Washington Post reporters read a book, A Very Stable Genius, but they didn't mean it. It was like meant to be like sarcastic and mocking.
Sure.
Now, very stable, they had a point there in terms of mocking, sarcastic. All right, Hogan, here we go. Uh, Tariffs. Woke up this morning. Tariffs are off. Well, now they're back on. Court of Appeals number one, Sam, said, no, hold on. Let's wait a little bit. Let's think this through. Tariffs are on for now, thanks to appeals court and win for Trump. Now, it's a temporary pause. And remember this weird three-judge panel for the Star Chamber, they said this thing, we got 10 days to phase this in. So it's all a big mess, but for now, and Sean made this point on the morning meeting, got a long way to go here. And it's possible it could be stayed. In other words, the tariffs could stay in place while we wait for the Supreme Court to do their thing. We just don't know. Here is Caroline Leavitt at the White House briefing today, number 3, saying that these judges don't know what they're talking about.
Last night, the Trump administration faced another example of judicial overreach. Using his full and proper legal authority, President Trump imposed universal tariffs and reciprocal tariffs on Liberation Day to address the extraordinary threat to our national security and economy posed by large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits. The United States has run a trade deficit of goods every year since 1975. In 2024, our trade deficit in goods exceeded $1 trillion. Everybody agrees this is unacceptable. President Trump is delivering on his promise to fix this problem, and he has taken a long overdue and much needed bold stance for American workers after decades of our manufacturing base being hollowed out. The president's rationale for imposing these powerful tariffs was legally sound and grounded in common sense. President Trump correctly believes that America cannot function safely long-term if we are unable to scale advanced domestic manufacturing capacity, have our own secure critical supply chains, and our defense industrial base is dependent on foreign adversaries. Three judges of the U.S. Court of International Trade disagreed and brazenly abused their judicial power to usurp the authority of President Trump to stop him from carrying out the mandate that the American people gave him.
Okay,
These
Tim, that's
judges
good.
failed to
Thank
acknowledge
you.
that the president.
So Hogan, when a judge or a panel of judges, let's leave the Supreme Court out because they're the final arbiters in cases that they take. When judges rule against a White House, not all White Houses blast the rulings the way this White House does. They just don't. They might say, we disagree, we're going to appeal. But this White House consistently says, the rogue court, political court. Here's Peter Navarro, number 4, even harder line, I think, than Caroline.
Urgency is $1.3 trillion a year going abroad, $18 trillion of American wealth so far transferred into foreign hands, and millions of jobs lost, hundreds of thousands of factories gone. That's the emergency. And the American people understand this. Okay. Main Street understands this. Wall Street is in denial about this, and this rogue court apparently doesn't think that having Main Street America dying from fentanyl and not having jobs is an emergency. We think it is, and it damn well is.
So Hogan, judges are humans too, and I think judges probably don't like, I would guess, the executive branch calling their colleagues rogue and all the things Caroline suggested. So what's the point of being so negative about the judges and questioning their motives? What's the point of that?
Well, I'm gonna let you in a little bit here, Mark, and explain to the group here some naivete on my part in the White House. I remember we had a big Supreme Court ruling coming up my first year, and I was talking to White House counsel about the various ways we were going to try and message this particular ruling. And I made the point that the court wasn't political. And this particular attorney for the Trump administration snapped his head real fast and looked at me like I was a crazy person. And in that moment, I went, wait a minute, that was probably the dumbest thing I've said in a long time. And he goes, you think the Supreme Court isn't political? And I went, no, you're right, I get it. That goes back to what you just said about the human factor of it. So, as you know, Trump likes to exploit what he thinks is a winning issue, a winning message whenever he can. And there is no secret that these courts, by every measurable piece of data or statistic, shows they've gone after this president much more than any president in history. And you may say, well, that's because that's what he's doing. Joe Biden loses a Supreme Court ruling on paying for kids' tuition and says, forget the court. We're just going to blow right past it. So you can say you don't like Donald Trump's rhetoric about the court, but at least he keeps saying consistently he's going to abide by the ruling. So did Caroline Levin in that briefing. Said we're going to go forward.
I'm sorry, I didn't say I didn't like it. I just asked you what the rationale was for.
I didn't mean you. I meant collectively.
One. Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Collectively, not you directly.
Okay.
Mark.
Okay.
Yeah. People may not like it.
Yeah.
But at least he's saying he's going to abide by the ruling, whereas the Biden administration said, ruling, schmooling, screw it. We're going to try and move forward regardless. So there's some differences there too. But this court battle over these types of things, this isn't the end of it. This is the beginning. This will keep going on for the entirety of his administration, like it does for most Republican administrations.
Okay. You mentioned Joe Biden. We're going to talk about Joe Biden now. People, do not ask me questions in the chat because I never read it. So if you say, Mark, what do you think of this? Don't do it because I never read it. I glance at it, but I never read it. Raise your hand if you want to be in the conversation. So liberals and some Democrats, I'm hearing increasingly from folks, and we've heard some of it in this platform, who all of a sudden are horrified that the Biden White House covered up as best they could the president's mental decline. They didn't cover it up very well because some of us saw it with our own eyes, and most of the American people did. But they did attempt to hide the details of it, so it would be less vivid and less obvious, although, again, I don't know how much more obvious it could have been. The Democrats are still not blaming the media very much, which I find hilarious because the media was a big part of it. But there are some people who say, with all the scandals going on in the Trump administration, with all the outrageous behavior, accepting of gifts and the crypto stuff, let's just move on from Joe Biden. Let's not worry about the fact that we had a president of the United States who was surrounded by a complicit media and a number of aides and his family who tried to get him to be president for 4 more years when he wasn't really up to being president in 2019, let alone 2024, let alone 2028. Okay. So what I would say to you is imagine there was a Republican president who you didn't like, and this happened where he was in office and the system failed. The cabinet, who according to this new book, some members of which knew that there was a problem, didn't try to invoke the 25th Amendment. The vice president didn't try to invoke it. Members of his party, even after the debate, trotted out to say, no, nothing to see here. Bad 90 minutes. Otherwise, he's great. If that happened, the shoe was on the other foot, I guarantee you Democrats would say this needs to be investigated, not just for political gain, although we'll get to the question of political gain in a minute, as Republicans now demand an investigation. But really, I can think of no greater responsibility, truly, for oversight by the Congress than to say, how do we keep this from happening again? How do we keep it from happening again where a guy who has clearly no business doing the job, good days and bad days, could do the job on some days, but some days he couldn't do the job. And it's not a job where you can do it only on days when you can do it. You got to be able to do it every day. How could that have happened? Right? I think that's a worthy topic of investigation. Now, having said that, today at the White House briefing, the White House press secretary, in response to a question from Fox News, took what I consider to be a shocking tone and approach towards the question of was there a cover-up and what was the role of the former First Lady? Here is Caroline Leavitt, number 5.
Frankly, the former First Lady should certainly speak up about what she saw in regards to her husband and when she saw it and what she knew. Because I think anybody looking, again, at the videos and photo evidence of Joe Biden with your own eyes and a little bit of common sense can see this was a clear cover-up. And Jill Biden was certainly complicit in that cover-up. There's documentation, video evidence of her clearly shielding her husband away from the cameras. They were just on The View last week. She was saying everything is fine. She's still lying to the American people. She still thinks the American public are so stupid that they're going to believe her lies. And frankly, it's insulting, and she needs to answer for it.
Hogan, I don't know that I'm right about this, but I think I am. I don't believe in American history a White House press secretary has called a former First Lady a liar from the podium. But I also don't disagree with anything that Caroline Leavitt said. But also, what's the point of engaging on this? I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to understand what's the point of the White House press secretary going after the former First Lady? What does that serve? What interest does that serve?
All right. I think a couple things here. Joe Biden himself, or whoever's running the thing, inserted Jill Biden into the presidency. She was running cabinet meetings, for heaven's sakes.
I think that's an overstatement. She played a big role.
Whatever. She's sitting there making comments. Don't pretend like that's common for first ladies. It's not. It was turned back over to her on multiple occasions. She bailed him out of the interview with The View and other places. She's done it countless times.
Okay, but why is that? And again, I'm not asking this either rhetorically or argumentatively. Okay.
You gotta let me warm up, Mark.
I know. Lay down your Southern predicate, Hogan.
That's right. It matters because there's no one closer to the president than the First Lady. In this particular instance, Jill.
I agree that the Washington Post should investigate it, and I should investigate it. But why is the White House press secretary making accusations about the former First Lady and demanding an investigation? What interest of hers is that? Again, I just want you to explain it. It's a worthy topic, as I said. I think Congress should investigate it.
I think it further goes to justify and act as a defense to everybody in Trump orbit who was saying this, what we obviously saw for several years. The media refused to acknowledge. It further goes to break down the press and their credibility, of which they have none right now because of their own making and their own malfeasance, their own ridiculous.
These are all great points for Scott Jennings to make on CNN. I ask again, maybe for the last time, why doesn't the White House press secretary just say, I think the American people can see what happens. This is something that should be investigated. Next question. Why is she calling the First Lady a liar? I just want to understand what's the motive. What political or substantive interest does that serve?
Well, obviously, politically, she wants answers because it further dogs the Democrats. That's just the answer.
Okay,
That's what she wants.
That's a good answer. Now, as I say, congressional investigation. Here's the man Hogan calls Ron John, more formally known as Republican Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. You do call him that. I've
Didn't
heard you call
everyone
him
call him Ron John?
Not me. I call him Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson.
I don't mean to be
Just-
disrespectful. I like the guy.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. Is his name Ronald Johnson? He probably is, right?
I
Okay.
don't know.
Here's Ron Johnson saying there needs to be an investigation. This is number 6, please.
Well, you start with a serious investigation. And we'll start with, and we've issued letters to, I think, 28 individuals, people that you would expect had constant or frequent contact with President Biden. And you ask them some basic questions. I'm primarily concerned about, because we all saw his physical deterioration. Nobody takes joy in that. I mean, it's nothing good about getting old. But I'm most concerned about his mental deterioration, which was pretty obvious, I think, for a couple of years. I would say even during his initial campaign, which the press covered up for him, allowed him to win the presidency campaign from his basement. Yeah. But I'm primarily concerned about that mental incapacity. And what did the cabinet, what did the vice president do? What were their discussions? There's a reason we have a 25th Amendment. This is the most powerful elected official in the world, in the history of the world. He has access to the nuclear codes. The administration makes decisions that impact every American and, quite honestly, impact people globally. You can't afford to have somebody who is mentally incapacitated in that position. That's why we have a 25th Amendment, and it is the responsibility. These individuals take an oath to uphold the Constitution. That includes the 25th Amendment. And that means if they witness the president incapable of fulfilling the duties of the president, they need to discuss it amongst themselves. I'm not saying it'd be an easy decision, but they need to invoke the 25th Amendment to protect the Constitution, to protect this nation, to protect American citizens.
He goes on. But here's the question I want to ask. Here's the question I want to ask you, Hogan. Let's say you and I were staffers for Ron Johnson, and we were in a meeting talking about planning this investigation. I'll make you the communications director, and I'll be the hard-charging but junior press secretary. Okay. And Ron Johnson says, here's how we're going to go. You know, I'm going to go on Benny Johnson's show, and I'm going to go on Hannity. Here's what I'd say. And I have to screw up my courage to say this to a United States Senator, my boss, communications director, Hogan Gidley. I'd say for both the politics and the substance, let's go to every Democrat on the committee and let's ask them to join us and make this a bipartisan investigation, because they now need to cleanse themselves from the lies that they were involved in, and politically, it'd be good for them to come clean, and it's the right thing to do because everything Ron Johnson's saying is true. That we can't let this happen again. So let's go to every senator. We can do it at the staff level. Senator, you can go to the Democrats on the committee. And let's make this a bipartisan event. Maybe we won't get every Democrat. Let's get one Democrat on the committee, and let's do TV appearances together. Let's go on dominant media, not just conservative media, and let's make this investigation like the Watergate investigation, bipartisan. What would you say if I said that in the meeting? Do you fire me on the spot?
I might, because I would say Mark Halperin, you're such a sweet kid. I love how you think we're back in this DC decorum age. Also, we don't know that Ron John didn't go, Senator Johnson did not go to these people and already asked them for it, and they said no. In large part because if they said yes, the questions would be clear. Why didn't you say anything? This is your guy. You saw everything we saw. You have intimate knowledge we don't have. So I don't know that he shouldn't do that. I mean, look, he wants to extend the olive branch, he wants to make the ask, sure, whatever. But I don't know that he didn't.
But Hogan, think how much more powerful it would be, symbolically and substantively, for the Democrats to have to basically admit all the things you just said.
But they're welcome to do it. They just haven't.
Well,
and they won't.
But you don't know. But I know you say he might have asked. I doubt he did. And I would say to him, stop going on exclusively on conservative media. Demand to be on MSNBC and CNN
and
CBS.
Speaking of two-way.
But I think they might put him on because they're coming a little bit out of their denial, not a lot.
You think people at MSNBC would have him on? Maybe. Maybe. I mean, it's gonna be hard to turn down a city.
Maybe because now they're all about, like, well, Jake Tapper uncovered this incredible story we didn't know about, so let's cover it now. They're covering the book. They're covering the book.
Okay. All right. Yes. I want to talk about the substance of what he said too, but you're talking about the strategy of.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Talk about the substance.
I just want to say this. You made a point earlier I didn't get to talk about when you said, could you imagine if a Republican president, this Joe Biden was Republican, Democrats would still be going back and saying, we want to find out more about this.
Yeah.
You don't have to pretend. We had one. And you remember Donald Trump walks down a ramp that was downward facing in dress shoes after like a mist, and he walked slowly to prevent from slipping. And the outpouring of like orthopedic surgeons and mental, therapists on all these shows were saying this guy needs to be taken out by the 25th Amendment. No question. He doesn't have the capacity to do the job. We just saw this. And then when you flip the script and you see what Biden was actually doing, being led around all the things we know about, of course, Ron Johnson should be out talking about this. You're just saying he shouldn't just go to exclusively Republican or conservative outlets. And by the way, I'm most certain he will continue this drumbeat and will appear on some of the leftist networks as well. But you're still going to have to scratch the itch of MAGA base too, if you're going to try and further this.
But I think that if you want to do an investigation that's legit, it's true of both parties. You want to do an investigation that's legit, and you want it to have an influence politically. Sure, you can just go to your base media and ring the bell but here's the thing, okay?
They haven't started it, right?
But say again.
They haven't started it, right?
Well, they haven't started, but I'll give you an example. Mr. Comer of Kentucky. I say this with peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace for the gentleman from Kentucky. He completely botched the Hunter Biden Inc. investigation, in part because he overpromised, but in part he overpromised because he just would go on conservative media and talk crap. He'd go on conservative media and get way beyond the facts, and they get egged on to go beyond the facts when they're on conservative media because they feel like gotta feed the beast, more red meat, more red meat. If he had just stuck to the facts and said to the Today Show, put me on, now he would have been blacklisted some places, but I think he would have gotten on some places. That's my thinking. All right.
I don't know.
One more topic, and then we're going to go to your questions. Please raise your.
Hey, real quick. Those major three networks covered it over the course of several years, all of like 93 seconds. Like they didn't talk about it.
I know, but in part they didn't talk about it because the Republicans, they gave an excuse not to talk about it by not sticking to the facts.
But they could have investigated themselves. They're effing journalists.
Hogan, I'm no apologist for the cover.
I know that. I'm not saying that. I'm just making.
But what I'm saying is you can do the right thing for the party and for the country by sticking to the facts and going to the press and say, put me on. Not just saying, when can I next be on Hannity? Nothing against Sean. Speaking of Fox News personalities, you know Newt, you know Speaker Gingrich, and you know Tucker Carlson, right?
I do.
You know anything about their relationship?
Nope.
Okay. So Newt was on my next up video podcast. You can watch it now on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast. And I did this word association with him. Did I already tell you this? I feel like
no,
but
I
did
can't
word
wait.
association. So I asked him about Pete Hegseth and asked him about
Hogan Gidley.
Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller did not do Gidley.
Okay.
Asked him about Pam Bondi. And then just listen to what happens when I get to ask him about Tucker. Roll this, please. Word association, 1 or 2 words max for Trump figures. 1 or 2 words max. Here we go. Marco Rubio.
Brilliant job.
Pete Hegseth.
Still learning.
Scott Bessent.
Remarkable.
Stephen Miller.
Amazingly powerful.
Correct. These are very good answers, by the way, audience. Susie Wiles.
Indispensable.
Also correct. These are very good answers. Okay, Michael Whatley, chairman of the RNC.
Good job.
Speaker Johnson.
Astonishing job. Impossible. I can't imagine it.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. Okay, Kash Patel.
Growing.
Okay. Interesting. Pam Bondi.
Excellent choice.
Excellent choice. All right, Don Jr.
Amazingly influential.
Also correct. Charlie Kirk.
Equally amazingly influential.
Yeah.
I'll give you the third one on that. Tucker Carlson.
I don't understand it.
Tell me about that.
I mean, he seems to have a very strong grip on some people, and I'm underwhelmed.
Underwhelmed by his intellect, his
Well,
policy positions?
by his influence, by some of his attitudes, some of his views.
How do you distinguish between him and Charlie?
I think Charlie's much less on the fringe than Tucker is.
And do you have a personal relationship with Tucker?
No.
No. That surprises me because most people like that.
Well, I know a lot of people. I mean, we
Yeah.
all have limits to how much time we have.
Understood. All right. So you can see your normally unflappable host, me, was kind of thrown because I had no idea that he and Tucker weren't friends. I don't know. Was he not on Tucker's show when Tucker was on Fox? Hogan, what do you make of that?
Well, again, in full disclosure here, I'm friends with Tucker, friendly with Tucker, and know Newt a little bit through different campaigns and work. I don't know. I mean, I think Newt obviously accurately describing how he feels with Tucker because there are people in the party who don't like Tucker. There are plenty who would follow him to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
And I think Newt being Newt, able to articulate kind of a pull back 30,000 foot view. And then what was interesting was, though, he did say, I don't get it. Instead of just outlining the whole playing field and saying here, and not really taking an opinion, then he just goes, I don't get it when it comes to Newt. Or when it comes to Tucker. That, to me, is the most interesting part of it. So it's clear there's some type of animus or some type of frustration he has with Tucker Carlson and his massive influence.
Yeah. I did a horrible job, I have to say, but I was just so stunned. I didn't follow up appropriately. Maybe I'll have Newt back and we'll do it again. Reed, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are after you unmute and what's on your mind for J. Hogan Gidley.
I am on the Mississippi coast, and Hogan, glad to be on with you.
Hogan went to Ole Miss, right?
I am. I'm a state guy, but
Okay.
I'm working at Ole Miss right now. Working at Mississippi State. We're in higher education.
Okay,
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah, I love Ole Miss, and love everything about Hogan. So, my question is: yesterday on the morning meeting, y'all touched on it, but I was surprised at how little attention y'all gave to Warren's comments about, Sachs's comments about Elizabeth Warren controlling the auto pen. Dan did a good job of recognizing that Bernie and Warren's people were all throughout the White House, but there wasn't a lot of attention drawn to that comment from Sachs that was in that New York Post article.
Yes, sir.
I just was curious how, I'm constantly amazed at how quickly something can die out of the news realm because something else happens, like today, the tariff news and all of the market uncertainty. But I'm just surprised y'all didn't latch on to Sachs's comments about Elizabeth Warren controlling the auto pen.
I'll go first. And this goes back to my criticism of people in both parties who go beyond the facts. I don't dispute the possibility that Elizabeth Warren had the nuclear codes to the auto pen. I don't dispute that Barack Obama was secretly running the Biden White House, or that Joe Biden was. But when I say I don't dispute it, it means I'm open to evidence, but there's no evidence of this.
None. Yeah,
there's none.
I'm just surprised you didn't latch onto it
in a critical way. Well, I probably should have, and I don't have perfect clarity, but I think I almost did. But there's so many outrageously false accusations made by people on the right against the Biden White House that I've just become a nerd to it. But in a micro way. I should have corrected it. I didn't. But I let a lot of them go by because it happens all the time. And it's ridiculous because there are real things to criticize. There's things we saw that don't require investigative reporting. But to then just make these things up And the Democrats do it too. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's one party, but you're right. We should have said, Mr. Sachs, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Elizabeth Warren in the auto pen? There's no evidence of that. Now, again, the way my journalistic mind works, he might be right, but he shouldn't say it without evidence. Hogan, what do you know about Elizabeth Warren's secret access to the auto pen codes?
I didn't see this. I didn't see this exchange. What was the
Sachs,
quote by Sachs?
Sachs was on talking about a bunch of stuff, and it was like a throwaway line. He's like, "Well, in the Biden administration, Elizabeth Warren controlled the auto pen." He just asserted it.
Yeah, it was wild.
Sounds right.
I wish we had spent more time
I'm just kidding.
welching it.
Yeah, but Hogan, let's say you were staffing Sachs, very smart man, and he came off that appearance on media, and he said, "How'd I do?" Would you say, "Well, you made an assertion that's not backed up by fact, unless you know something I don't know about Elizabeth Warren having access to the auto pen code for your credibility in public, boss? You probably shouldn't say something you can't back up." Would you have done that?
I'd say we probably need to clean a couple things up. I'd have said it more judiciously than the way you did. After all, that would be my boss and someone who's paying me.
Yeah.
I like how you put me in these comms roles for every single person we're talking about, but sure.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right, because that's a pretty hot line to say.
Yeah, it was Jesse Waters prime time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like,
Yeah.
it was.
If you've got time,
Yeah.
if you've got the evidence, show it.
But he
I love
doesn't.
Well-
He doesn't. Reed, I'm so glad you brought it up. And again, this is my second mea culpa of the episode. I should have said something about it.
No, we're all human, Mark. I don't think that's the your fault there. I wish we'd spent more time talking about, the stable coin, and just, I mean, like Sean said, it's like trying to explain space to somebody.
Yeah.
And the Genius Act. My friends over in Haggerty's office who were helping write that bill, people need to understand the significance of that Genius Act, and we spent so little time kind of understanding that. I'd love to spend an entire time talking about crypto. I know we did about a month and a half ago, but it's hard to catch up live on these. And
Did you ever?
You're right about that. And just Hogan, before you go, we're working on a couple shows on crypto. Hopefully, one will be on soon, and it's going to be hopefully aimed at people who both understand it and people like me and Hogan who have no idea how it really works. Hogan.
Speaking of, I don't know if any of you guys watching today, listening, saw the SNL sketch where Elon was hosting, and they were asking, it was on Weekend Update, about crypto.
Yeah.
I was backstage when he was at the Capitol one time with him and his kid and the speaker, and we started talking about that sketch. And I was like, you realize how funny that actually was when you kept saying sentences and everyone was like, yeah, I don't know. And what is that exactly? What is it? And so I think so many people still don't understand it because it is quite confusing. So Mark, I hope you do have people on to talk about this, but there's a little exchange between Elon and myself where he laughed and said, no, I love doing it because people don't have a clue what it is. And I was like, yeah, they don't.
Mark, thanks for calling on me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Reed.
Reed, thanks for coming on. What's that thing they say at Ole Miss?
They say hotty toddy at Ole Miss, but they don't say that at
Hell State. It's the school up north.
What do they say? It's
Hale State.
What do they say at State? Hell State.
Hale State.
That's
Hogan,
what you got?
we were you were at Ole Miss and I was at State at the same time, so I'm sure our path probably crossed.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Reed, you look like you could be Hogan's younger cousin.
Hey, come down to the coast and go fishing. That's what I'm all about.
Hell yeah.
All right. We'll plan on that. Reed, thank you. Grateful to have you.
Thanks,
on.
Reed.
Appreciate it. Got to go to Dustin because I haven't worked out in a few hours, and so I'm just getting a vicarious thrill here. Dustin, don't fall off that thing, but unmute if you can. And got the Cougars sweatshirt on or tee?
Yes, sir. Go Cougs.
Dustin, what's on your mind as you burn off the bucket of cheese pretzels you had earlier today?
Well, Mark, I wanted to ask you about, with all of these journalists involved in the Biden cover, I'm a big believer that people respond to incentives. And I assume that a lot of the incentives that these reporters were responding to was access to White House sources, access to, parties in Washington, D.C., the media circuit. Why do you think you were not influenced by those incentives and able to stay as objective as you were on this story?
So my back of the envelope analysis, thank you for the question, of my colleagues is 75% of it was wanting to make sure Trump didn't win, and 25% intimidation by the Biden folks who threatened them with cutoff of access if they didn't play ball. That's my back of the envelope. Um, uh, I wasn't for Trump or against him, but I wasn't in the category of 95% of the reporters who were against him. And so it didn't matter to me if I did things that helped Trump win. I did stuff that helped Trump win, inadvertently, just matter of fact, by reporting on some things, and some that helped, some that hurt him, some that helped him. So I'm impervious to that. But their mission has always been to tilt towards Democrats before Trump. After Trump, 2015 on, their mission was affirmatively stop Trump at all costs. So that's one. And then two, I'm impervious to being threatened by people for cutting off access. I just am. And they know that. And so I rarely get threatened. Sometimes I do, but very rarely, because they just know that I'm just not going to respond to that in a favorable way. That's my explanation. Hogan, comments?
I would love to get into a deep dive with Dustin about the years I've known Mark Halperin and how we all on the right feel about Mark Halperin. But I will say,
go on.
Yeah, no. I think there are, or there used to be. Look, I said this before on your show, but when I was at Ole Miss, I had a journalism professor who was a reporter in Memphis, and he basically was a communist, Marxist, atheist, basically. If you put an editorialized word in a story, he'd fail it immediately. Just one word that was editorialized, because he realized the job of a journalist was to actually report news. I do think Mark's own political, personal beliefs aside, and I don't know what all of them are. I think I know what some of them are, but there are very few people out there who genuinely have the gene of curiosity as a journalist, which is really their entire function in the first place. Just the smallest modicum of curiosity would have gotten more factual information from Russia collusion or the Hunter Biden laptop or Joe Biden's mental health. And the position that most media find themselves in right now, being that unpopular, and as I like to joke, somewhere between Congress and COVID, it's because they've been lying to us now for decades. And so it's a bed they themselves made, so they're going to have to lie in it. But for Mark to have, I don't want to kiss up to Mark here, but platforms like this where we can have these conversations and then have Mark kind of step in and say, wait, but you're not saying this, or they're not saying that. This is fair. This is not fair. There's none of that right now. The news is in essence editorial pages of the newspaper. You tune in to have your opinion substantiated, or you tune in to yell at whoever has, you think, the wrong opinion. It's very rarely fact-finding. And I was watching Scott Pelley, to call out someone I know from CBS, at his speech at Wake Forest at their commencement. I don't know if any of you guys saw it. Do yourself a favor. The stunning lack of self-awareness and self-righteousness is so unbelievable. To pretend as though these quote unquote journalists are just innocent bystanders and they're just standing there with no thumb on the scale, just with the purest of motives, calling out the other side for what they themselves are guilty of actually doing. It just blows my mind. But that's where we are. And so they're going to double down on those things. And I think incorrectly so. More people need to have Mark Halperin's attitude, is the summary sentence here, Dustin.
Thank you. Well, and Mark, if I can just say, your monologue last week on Next Stop with tips for how the media should, apologize and rebuild their credibility. I had all my kids watch that. I shared it with a bunch of people. The same way military enlistment is up, I think that your objective approach hopefully will lead to an increase in people who want to get into journalism and be objective journalists. So I thought it was fantastic.
Dustin, very kind of you. I appreciate you listening and sharing that. And don't forget to watch today's episode. Appreciate it. Grateful to you. Have a good workout. Hogan, what are some of my views that you secretly know?
I don't secretly know them. I said I think I understand.
Well, let's hear one or two.
Well, I do. Well, I don't want to go down this road in front of everybody, Mark.
That's right. Everybody, turn down your speakers. Just give us one. I'm curious, Hogan. Give us one.
I think you are someone who, in my opinion, leans more left than center.
Let's have some evidence for that, Hogan.
Personal beliefs.
Let's have some evidence.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
But I do think you're not one of those who are colored so much by a personal belief. By the way, either pro right or pro left, to let it color what you're reporting or your thought process. I do think you are one of those who, when you hear something this is so rare too, and this is something I learned again when I was in journalism years ago. You listen to your interviewee. You when they say something that doesn't hit right or something that you want to explore further, you stop them and do that. You do it with me, you do it with Sean, do everybody on the show. So few people do that because their narrative is already baked. Yeah. And
So Hogan, you made an assertion just now that I lean left.
I just feel that way.
Offer some evidence, Hogan.
It's just a feeling, Mark.
Hogan.
Gut feelings govern the world.
Tim and I want you to offer some evidence. Just give us a piece of evidence. I won't mind it. I won't think worse of you for it. Offer some evidence.
No, I just conversate. We've argued countless times over different candidates and issues over the years, and typically you're arguing against my candidates, which is fair to do.
Offer a piece of evidence. Which of your candidates have I argued, quote unquote, against?
Santorum was one of them, of course. Huckabee to some degree.
All right, I have great relationships with those guys, Hogan.
Of course you do.
I've never argued against them.
Because you're fair. I'm just saying.
Hogan, if you go read, you ever heard the book All's Fair by James Carville and Mary Madeline?
No.
If you go to that book, on like page 1, or maybe it's page 2, it said they're talking about me, and they say James thinks Mark is right wing, and Mary thinks Mark is left wing. And almost every Republican I know either thinks I'm fair or thinks I'm left wing. And believe me, Hogan, the Democrats think I'm right wing.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
That shows you're doing the job right.
But I would think, I don't mean to be so self-involved, but this is one of my real annoyances because of how careful I am. You can't offer a single thing. I don't think you're holding back. You literally can't. You know how I know you can't, Hogan? Because it's not true. You couldn't. I live in New York City. Somebody put in the chat. I don't read the chat, but I glance at it. I was on MSNBC. What's the guy's name? What's the name of the guy? White hair, conservative commentator, has a podcast, was a Washington Post columnist. You know what I mean? Hugh Hewitt. Hugh Hewitt had an MSNBC deal. So I don't think Hugh Hewitt's liberal. Being on MSNBC is not, as Hugh
I used to go on MSNBC all the time.
Yeah, it's not a priori me I'm liberal. My point is, Hogan, you just make an assertion about me. You've got no evidence of it, and you couldn't have any evidence of it.
But
yeah,
and I know you're getting riled up, but just take a breath and let me tell you, you didn't let me give you the percentages. You're fond of saying percentages.
Yeah,
I think it's 50.5 one way and 40.
You don't even have any evidence to get me to 55, Hogan. You just don't.
I said 50.5.
Oh. So when you say I lean left, you mean I lean left? I
don't mean all the way lean. I mean like this. At the most.
Even that you have no evidence for. It's just such BS, Hogan. It's such BS. I've dealt with it my whole career. I worked so hard. And there are people on this platform who think what you think or the opposite, but there's no evidence for it because I work very hard at it. All right.
I lean right.
Enough. I know you do. Enough about me. Welcome in, Megan. Thank you for joining. Unmute. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind. And if you'd like to criticize Hogan for his unadulterated bias, please do.
I'm from Arizona, but I'm actually in Tennessee right now because I kind of know Matt about. So
yeah,
I was through Arkansas, Hogan, and I thought of you.
Nice.
It's a beautiful
state.
Yeah. So Mark, I was just thinking, Hogan, what you should have said to Mark's,
please,
rope-a-dope was, Mark, I've noticed that you your knee-jerk reactions with institutions is to defend them, and that's what I would say. I think you lean left. And so,
hot take from Megan.
Yeah, what institutions do I reflexively defend?
Universities, the media in general, like no.
Oh no. I defend the media.
Yes.
Oh no. Somebody on this platform back me up. I'm the biggest critic. I'm the biggest critic. And I don't defend universities either. Megan, with all due respect, this is worse than Hogan. Hogan had no examples. You have two horrible false examples.
No. Your knee-jerk reaction is to revere the old old form of institutions. I'm not saying the new form. I'm not saying the past 10 years. I'm saying 25, 30 years ago, you always loved to sort of behold the old way things were.
Romanticize.
You're saying that I romanticize 25 years ago, or I romanticize now about what happened 25 years ago?
No, you romanticize the old way that institutions would act. And I think it's a tell that you lean left. I'm just saying, because I'm a writer.
Give me an example of a sentence that it doesn't have to be an actual sentence. What's the kind of thing I would say that illustrates your point?
So for example, when the Harvard story first started to break at the very beginning, okay, not like in the last week or anything.
Yeah.
It was, these institutions are institutions. They're beloved, they're respected. Harvard is Harvard.
I've never said that in my life, because I believe the opposite of that. The only thing I said, because and this is I would say more of a conservative view, is I don't think the government should be telling private institutions what to do.
But let me just, let's call it feminine intuition then. Okay. I'll just default to being a woman.
So I got feminist intuition and Hogan's bullshit. That's what we have here.
Yeah. So it's not a very strong argument. I hear, but I would need to look back, but I swear I've seen times where I see a knee jerk.
Megan, I'll give you 3 weeks and you come back with the best example you can find.
I will.
Right.
I will. I promise I will.
All right. I look forward to that.
Yeah. Here's my point I wanted to bring up with Hogan, actually, since you're here, Hogan. And I was driving through Arkansas, which is the home of Walmart. And I was thinking critically about the tariffs and sort of this new economy idea that Trump is trying to bring to fruition. And something that's bothering me, Hogan, about the communications of it from Trump on down is how big and grand everything is. He's constantly touting $1 trillion from the Middle East, $1 trillion from these people pouring into our country. Yay. And that's not bad. I'll take it. But I was going from Walmart to Walmart to Walmart. Every Walmart you walk in and it's soulless crap from I don't even know where. And there's no local section of Walmart where you can buy stuff from the community around that Walmart. It's just soulless. And I feel like the administration, he had Bezos sitting in his front row. He had these corporate giants. Why can't he talk to them about making these giant corporations more small business friendly and just more made in American in general without, how is that hard? They never talk about it.
Well, remember when he actually did the tariff announcement on Liberation Day, in the crowd, he had people in hard hats. Okay. What he's trying to do is realign what has typically been an economy that has kicked us in the teeth. Now, we can debate whether or not tariffs are the way to go there. And Megan, I do kind of chuckle because you're telling me Trump likes to go big and use large numbers for things. I've never heard of such.
I know.
But out of the corner of my eye, I'm seeing Scott Besson on television tonight. I'm recording it. So after this, my obligation.
What's he on? Fox? What's he on?
Yeah, he's on with Brett Baer right now. And
that guy might as well be a co-host of that show.
Well, I'm telling you, he has a real calming presence with this. So, look, this is going to take some time to reorient this I guess this system that we've grown accustomed to for all these years. But there's no question Donald Trump does, give that voice to the voiceless and has. That's what he ran on and won on. And small businesses in a lot of these small states and small cities and towns have been taken over by the Walmarts of the world and others. But that's a bigger issue, I guess, to talk about our capitalist system, et cetera. But I do think our capacity as Americans to accept any amount of pain for a long-term gain is not there. So it remains to be seen. Now, Trump is going to have a long runway, a long leash, whatever euphemism or metaphor or simile you want to use to get this done, because it's if only he'd been president before and given us the greatest economy. Oh, wait, he did. So I think a lot of people are going, all right, we're
Yeah.
going to give you some time to get this going, and we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Megan,
Your question.
Megan, we'll see it by June 19th with your female intuition and your Oppo research with your best sentence that demonstrates conclusively that I am a wild-eyed liberal. And again, I'm not arguing I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative.
That's it.
I'm really not. I like the Boston Red Sox. If you count that as an institution, I'm guilty.
Clearly.
But except for that, I don't really like any institutions. Megan, I'll see you by June 19th. Welcome in. Lisa, thank you for joining. Your question for J. Hogan Gidley or
Sure.
whatever.
Actually, I do have I think I might have evidence.
Really? All right.
So
Dustin and I are
have
ready.
to say, I've been listening since before the election. I think
Yeah.
you're totally you try to hide it very well. But you had mentioned, I think it was last week, that the gentleman who hosted before Dan did on the morning show
Tim Hogan
was a Democrat, and he emailed you asking for a donation.
No,
to the
he didn't email me. He didn't email me. I get email solicitations for money from both parties. I get 100 from Trump a day.
Okay, that was my only thing.
Okay, so all that was I've never given the Democrats a dime. I don't know how I got on the DNC list, but I get the email solicitations. I get them from AOC.
Me
I
too.
get them from Bernie Sanders.
Me
I
too.
get them from
Okay.
I get 100.
Well, then I'm wrong.
So Lisa, that's like we're going downhill. Hogan had no evidence. And then
That's pretty good.
Hogan had no evidence. Megan had baseless
intuition.
claims and female intuition. And I got a form email from the DNC. So we're going
I'm
backwards.
just saying,
We're
I
going
don't
backwards.
get it from the DNC. So
Again,
I'm
I get
offended.
100 a day from Donald Trump. So if you're going to say Halperin is a liberal because he gets one DNC email, you'd have to say I'm pure MAGA because I get 100 a day from Trump. Is that what you want to come on for, to tell me?
Well, that was what I raised my hand
liberal,
about, but
I'm
I
a
do
liberal
want to
because I got an
just
email
add
from the
on to-
DNC. All right.
add on to the last
whole thing's
part.
hilarious. Lisa, please.
I think what's interesting, and I really agree with everybody saying that you've done a really good job talking about the media and everything. And this kind of ties into what the last conversation was about. I feel like the media is, and it's not just the mainstream media that we think of, it's financial media as well. I do finance, I'm a financial advisor. And common conversations I'm having with people is they think the market's way down still because the media likes to play into the down and not talk about any kind of recovery. And I think
100%.
that really builds into fear of a lot of different things. And so I think this is a much bigger issue than anything. And I don't think it's just because of Trump. I think it's in general, the media tends to have this pulse point of their business. I get it, but at the same time, they don't report the other news either.
I totally agree with you, and it's a little bit odd, and Hogan will comment, because they're not as liberally biased, right? Like they're still liberally biased on balance, but they're not as liberally biased, and yet they downplay the fact that the market's largely recovered.
Yeah,
Hogan,
absolutely.
Thoughts?
No, you're right.
Speak about Joe Kernan, if you will.
Yeah, but that I think the exception proves the rule, Mark. There aren't
there
that
you go.
many.
Yeah,
There
I
aren't that
agree.
many out there who still tout Donald Trump's abilities here.
I mean, Andrew Ross Sorkin might as well write for The Nation magazine.
Well, look, the bias occurs in two ways: what you decide to cover, and then how you decide to cover it.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about the economy in negative terms, then obviously there's a bias there, and I would love to have a conversation about bias writ large on another show. But no, I think your observation, Lisa, is 100% correct. I just real quick, Mark, I will say, I do think you're very fair as we go back to the Mark Halperin.
Yeah,
deal.
that's the main topic tonight.
But I will also say this to give you a good Southern phrase: it's the hit dog that yelps, and you're yelping pretty loud in this segment.
I would yelp just as loud as somebody came
I'm just
on.
messing. Just no one.
A guy, Lisa,
You're fine.
Lisa, thank you. A guy came up to me today. I was at the Ritz Carlton where the Indiana Pacers are staying, and he said, "Oh, I love two-way. Thank you for two-way." And I'm so proud of this platform because people, when they see me and they recognize me for two-way, they almost always, they don't say, "Oh, I love two-way. I love you in two-way." They say, "Thank you for two-way." He said, "Thank you for two-way." They said, "Thank you for helping get Donald Trump elected." That's what he said. I said, what are you talking about? And he had a long explanation. It was not based on male intuition. It was based on the same thing Hogan has. Absolutely nothing. He's like, Trump must be so grateful to you for getting him elected. Anyway, Hogan, we're at time. I'm so grateful to you for being on. I love having you on. You're so generous with your time. I need the Speaker of the House on two-way or next week. So please work on that. Thank you for joining. Have a great evening.
You too.
Appreciate it. All right. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, the morning meeting. I'll be back with this program in 23 hours. And then don't forget, please, if you have not sampled my next up video podcast on the Megyn Kelly Network, I'd like you to watch it, share it, whatever. Interview with Newt Gingrich today on his new book, and my list of the 10 Democratic potential presidential candidates and the Frankenstein traits I would take from each of them based on talking to Democrats who are worried that they don't have an all-star. 10 traits from 10 different Democrats if you're building a Frankenstein candidate of how to build somebody who could take on J.D. Vance. You can watch it on YouTube on Next Up or download it as a podcast. I will see you at 9 a.m. Eastern time with Dan and Sean on the morning meeting. Very grateful to Hogan and to all of you. The three of you asked questions and made baseless allegations against me. I am not a scalded dog. I am just a seeker of truth. Thank you. Have a good night.